I'm Howlin, Steve Howell. I'm your host here today on BurntBossonRecords.com. Well, we appreciate you listeners all across America that are listening right now to these podcasts that we have. And the last four, I gotta say, have been real bang-ups. We've had Bluesmen Deluxe on. We've had Alistair Green on. We've had Wendy Wu out of Denver on. And also, most important is probably Kevin Self from Portland, Oregon. Oh my goodness, what a good time we had with him. You need to go listen to both of those because there's a before and after with that guy. And he put in the afterburners on this last one. And I would like to also, I'd like to say that Doug McLeod joined me last night, the famous bluesman that historically has been just about everywhere across the blues, has just about played with everybody, and we had a good time. Now today, we have a special guest, bringing it to you all the way from Australia. He's going to pour some wisdom and knowledge into the music business into us, and we're going to learn a lot from this man because he's been everywhere. He's a singer, songwriter. He is the CEO for Vampr. If you haven't heard of Vampr, you need to go check out that site. And so we want to welcome Josh Simons to the show. Hi, Josh. How are you?
Good afternoon or evening, Steve. I don't know what time it is there. I'd suggest it's the evening.
Oh, sure. It's we're running about 5 o'clock, a little bit after. Yeah.
Happy late afternoon to you.
And so what has been going on, man? You have so many exciting things that you could talk about. And, and I know that but I mean, how many interviews have you had? Probably thousands, probably by now, knowing what you've been through and what you have done in your podcast has been phenomenal and fantastic. And so what journey are you on right now?
You know, with all of the things I've done, and so like you mentioned, I had an artist project for many years, although that's kind of wrapped up. But I've written songs for many, fairly well-known people, and now with Vampr, which is a professional network connecting musicians across the world. The thing that they all have in common is really encouraging people to collaborate and work together. And so, what am I working on? I feel like that's just kind of my mission from, I don't know who's up there in the sky, but I think whatever that entity is has sent me here to help connect people. And that's what I'm doing. So you're right. I've done hundreds of these interviews, maybe not thousands, certainly hundreds, but the message is usually, if I've learned anything over time or seen patterns, it's about spreading that message of getting people talking to each other, working together, using that beautiful universal language of music to achieve greater things. And it's a real gift of a job in many respects.
That's really a great point because I mean, I've always said it like back in, like I could say all through the 60s and even into the late 70s, if you met somebody on the street that could really play or had something to say when they played, we would try to promote each other, I mean, as far as getting gigs, as far as what kind of music that we're playing. And we'd try to, and then we'd work out a time where we could actually play together and stuff like that. So it seems like this Vampr thing isn't probably a new idea, but it's a great idea for today because one of the things that I truly am promoting on my show is community. I want the community to grow, the community of the knowledge of musicianship, what it is to be a musician in today's business of music and how to actually prosper from that, which I'm not going to say that I'm, rich from playing music. I'm rich inside. I know that, but I've been doing it for 48 years and I've never ascribed to the height that you climbed so quickly.
Well, I'll say this. One of my data scientists overnight, so obviously we're a tech company, so we employ, a range of people with skills, but a very important role in a company like ours is data scientists that look at trends and stuff.
Sure.
she put out a question. She's in Europe, so she sent me a message overnight while I was sleeping, asking, have we done a lot of offline marketing in recent years? For reasons I won't bore you with why the question was asked, but the answer to that is, well, yes, we have. And the reason I bring this up is one of the things that we did, and I thought it was cheeky and fun, was because our platform effectively is the current day version of the job finding board at a rehearsal studio, or when you see a lamppost when you're walking a dog and there's an A4 sheet of paper or a letter and it has tear off things like, call this number if you're looking for a drummer, call this number.
Right.
We did a variation on that, but ironically our service is just a digital version of that. And so our offline marketing was doing those sorts of ads at rehearsal studios, music schools, lampposts, to get them to then use our product to do the same thing digitally. But we are a digital version of that trading post solution that was sort of how it worked up until fairly recently. And there's not really many good digital solutions. Like if you speak to someone who's like, let's call them a working class musician, so not necessarily making millions a year, but let's say a humble living, you'll probably find if they're, in their early 20s, that they got there maybe by using Facebook groups or Craigslist, potentially sliding into someone's DMs on Instagram and asking for work.
Right.
But all of those solutions are quite manual workarounds, and they still require kind of superhuman effort of manually looking and sorting through just a crap load of information online, and then shooting from the hip and hoping someone gets back to you, and then, as the universe tends to do, it rewards you. You put enough effort in. Our platform's about going, let's take all of that effort I just described, because it's a fair bit of effort, and let's consolidate that down into 5 seconds. And how can we do that? We use a combination of algorithms, machine learning, not to mention tens of millions, if not billions, of data points that we've collected over the years that help show us these broader trends of how are people networking, why are they networking, how can we make smarter recommendations to people about who they might want to collaborate with next in the industry. And that's the essence of Vampr.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's kind of like, it's like watching a movie, and there's several baseball movies out there where they have this guy that's promoting baseball, and they can't figure out why the team can't win and why they can't build the winning team. And so they work and work and work. And finally, this one guy sits down and he starts figuring out the numbers of what a certain player could do. And then all of a sudden that player now, you have a team that's going to be built on numbers and, like you say, algorithms that are going to make the super team that they want to be and actually put them in a very competitive market. In fact, it was proven by the Oakland A's. They definitely did it. I mean, they showed that formula absolutely works.
Well, if you think about like all of the most famous collaborations in history, like we always talk about John and Paul and the Beatles, right? They only met because by virtue of geography, right? They happen to be in close proximity. Now, you think about bands like Genesis or Led Zeppelin, or a lot of these bands meet because they happen to be at school or college or in the same community. And I always find that quite funny because they all went on to be super bands, right? Now, imagine if you had the playing field, or the picking field of the entire world, and then the equation changes. And so I don't think we've seen the outcome of that yet, right? Because it takes many years for bands to get some level of traction, not to mention that making an artist project stick in this day and age is harder than ever because there's 40,000 songs being released per day. There's a lot of noise that you're up against on things like TikTok and Spotify. But moving that to the side, in fact, even more important than ever, how do we assemble the best combinations of talent globally so that we can see the the potential for another band to hit stadium status, because at the current rate, the last great stadium band was probably Coldplay, and it's hard to imagine anyone coming through because bands just don't get opportunities for longevity anymore, because they get 3 minutes of fame and then it's gone, and then the next and then the next thing comes. So more important than ever, I think, is to assemble appropriate, similarly skilled musicians together to become something greater than the sum of their parts. But our other thing too is that, like, some of the bigger success stories historically have either been in those right cities, like I said, but they've probably also had some access to capital, even if it's just a small grant from their parents. And our whole mission statement is lower the barrier to entry so that it doesn't matter who you know, where you live, or how much money you have. And that's our sort of North Star, if you will.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm kind of past the peak of my performance years.
We can get you back out. We can get you back out on stage. I'm confident.
It's really cool because I've often thought about Vampr. I mean, I've looked at it ever since my wife brought it to my attention. She's been talking to me. Well, what are you doing? Because I sit here and record day in and day out. I'm most of the time sitting here spinning things off Logic, and using Reaper as a part of the DAW, and I kind of bounce it off the both of them to make music happen. Now I get to this point where, okay, I've sent it off to record companies and have gotten fantastic reviews, and then I bump into that little age thing called I'm 68 years old, but I really don't let that hold me back, because I think the reason why this podcast even exists is because I have such a love for music, and I have such a love for the musicians inside of that music. I have so much honor and respect because each one has gone down a road that is so hard, far a fault for. And so, I mean, when they get into that fight, it just seems like you run into managers don't want to pay you enough. You run into you got to pay up this much to get a commercial up. How are you gonna succeed in that business? And if you're by yourself and trying to do it all by yourself, it seems like it's just a tough road. And I've been honest with all my listeners. And this is an informative podcast, by the way. And so that's the kind of insights I try to pass on to them. Not that they're not their negativity is there, but then we have an answer sitting right in front of us. We have the CEO of Vampr, the guy who really knows. He's been the person on the big stage. He's been the big guy behind the stage. He knows the insides and out of that whole business. And folks, he's offering up something to you that is very, very cool. I mean, beyond cool. If you really are an aspiring musician and you want to meet the other musicians that can help you out with whatever you got to go, that's what this man has been saying to us. Hey,
the thing. Well, thank you. I think the part of my experience that makes me qualified to run a company like Vampr is not necessarily having played on some stages in front of 10,000.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
It's the years in between that make me qualified to run Vampr.
Right.
The journey from being a bedroom musician to playing on a stadium stage, it's those years in the middle where you're navigating what is frankly a business, as you say, that is extraordinarily complicated. I mean, for an industry that people generally enter because they want to avoid 9 to 5 in corporate America or corporate world.
Oh man,
it's quite funny. It's sad. It's
true.
It's quite concerning in many ways that they enter this ecosystem that is fraught with grifters, people willing to take advantage of a new talent, and then not to mention just the constant persistence that it requires and the thick skin that you have to develop in order to not, turn it all in and quit. There are some hacks that we can get into in a minute. I mean, I truly think you can quite systemic. Well, you can plan a way to success that's quite reliable, and we will get into that. But a lot of it does start with networking with people who are, as I say, at a similar skill level and on a similar playing field as you are. It almost guarantees that you'll get a result, and results compound. In fact, the music industry in general, obviously its payment structure is royalties typically. There's several different types of copyrights, of course, but royalties compound and experiences compound. And there's something quite nice about that. And so you can control these outcomes by, instead of trying to get into a room with Quincy Jones straight away, try and get in the room with Bob down the street, who's also been at it for a few years like you have. And your chances of actually getting in the room, number one, are exponentially higher. Number two, your chances of having a result that you can then show to someone else who might open another door for you are exponentially higher. So these are the sorts of things that, I've learned along the way, and that our company embodies and tries to sell. And when I say sell, I don't mean in a negative way. I mean promote in a positive, very much transformative way. Yes.
Well, on the rewind, I mean, if you don't mind, because you mentioned your story from beginning to end, can you compound it, and can you do us either a short version of it, or give us it all? It's like, people want to know who you are, man. I want to know who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll go back to the start. I will ask one quick question. Do you have the possibility of pausing this for 1 second? Is that possible, or is this uninterrupted?
I've never tried that. Oh, I can stop. Yeah, I can pause it. It says I can pause. Okay, I'll pause right now. And I was asking a little bit about the rewind. We were starting to progress there to a certain point, but I thought, boy, I really don't want to pass up on the chance for folks to hear where you came from and why you are and who you are today and why you created Vampr. I mean, you've already pretty much said that, but still, I think we can further, our knowledge about this whole process, because I'm fascinated. I mean, you got me, man. I'm on the show, and I feel like I'm learning about who I am as a musician on this show, which is pretty cool.
Well, thank you. So Vampr, I mean, it's helpful, to understand a little bit about my history and family history, perhaps.
Sure.
My family, I suppose, played a fairly prominent role in the early days of the music industry, broadly speaking. My granddad started a publishing company in the UK in, I think, the 1920s or 30s, called Leeds Music, which was acquired by Universal Pictures, I believe, and then turned into Universal Music Publishing Group. So it's kind of what is now Universal Music we founded effectively. He stayed on as chairman until he passed away in the year 2000. So very, very long tenure. And then my dad followed in his footsteps and was a music publisher and, worked with Paul McCartney and people like that. So it was kind of in our family's history a little bit, but none of them played music. And so when I was growing up and being raised by my folks, I was pushed more down, learn how to play piano. We'll support you in whatever you want to do, that kind of thing. The business of music, I had been around my entire life. I remember sitting in on an A&R session for Tom Jones' Sex Bomb in the year 2000. I was 10 years old. And I remember my granddad asking me which song should be the lead single, and I was a 10-year-old. Man. So I was sort of around the business of it. But, like anything, when you're a child, when you're around something, it doesn't seem, first and foremost, it doesn't seem like a job because you're just around it. So it's just a part of it. It doesn't seem like a business because it's just the language that's being spoken in the household. And so it just sort of becomes a culture. And anyway, so my dad passed away. My granddad passed away around a similar time. My mum moves us back from England to Australia and says, learn piano. And at this point, I'm 5 years old or something, right? Somewhere between 5 and 10. And so for me, it was always just a love of music. And I'd never considered going into the business of music until I was 19, managing a couple of bands that I just heard. I'd been introduced to people, and they said, "Oh, I make music. Here's my demo," and I listen. Oh, okay, I hear something special in that, and that led to another project. I was managing two bands, but both of those bands were extremely averse to pursuing commercial opportunities like syncs. Like I heard their songs on TV shows, like at the time, The OC and 24 and some other Fox shows.
Oh, wow.
I sort of had, again, I didn't know sweet FA about how to do any of this, but I'd been around it enough to kind of know what questions to ask. And life is just about knowing which questions to ask. Knowing process comes second.
Oh, absolutely.
So I had heard big things for these bands, but they were so averse to pursuing these commercial opportunities that I said, screw managing bands. I'm just going to start one and do the thing, make the sound that I'm hearing in my head. And so it all happened quite naturally and organically. The part that is unusual, and whenever I tell this part of the story, people go, "Oh shit!" But what happened next was, so I started a band. I had never sung in my life really, except school choir maybe. But I fronted a band, started this band, and then within 6 months we were on national radio. We were touring nationally and playing our first festival in front of tens of thousands of people. Now, that is not the normal trajectory.
No, no, not at all, boy. So, I mean, you're talking about a missile,
Yeah, but, unlike some other bands that have had similar trajectories, our missile wasn't like this sort of exponential curve. It was quite like we had a really quick start, and then we fell off for a little bit and had to find some love and then restart. And so it wasn't like completely easy going by any stretch of the imagination. It was quite fraught. Yeah. No, yeah. Like most journeys, quite fraught with ups and downs and near collapses and all that kind of stuff. But so anywho, I'm in this band. It's called Buchanan. It's doing really big things in Australia, starting to do some things in England, like it charted in England and somewhere in Spain or something. Then we made a bit of a mistake and we prematurely moved the project to England, thinking, let's do a bigger market. It's about 3 times the size of Australia in terms of people. We can potentially do a little better financially. And it was just a misstep because we didn't have a team in England. And this is where Vampr came from.
Oh.
So I underappreciated or undervalued, as a 20-year-old does, the amount of effort and time that we put into cultivating an incredible team of hardworking folks in Australia who plugged our songs on radio, who took our stuff to the press, who promoted shows, who introduced us to the best agents in the region, in the Southern Hemisphere, who introduced us to radio directors so that we could get familiar and friendly with them and get interviews on the back of that. We had all of that foundation set up in Australia, and just thinking that you can take that and start it in another territory is tremendously naive if you're not backed by a major label or major independent.
Oh, yeah.
And
I believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I shot my career in the foot a little bit, but Vampr, the idea of Vampr came from that. I thought, okay, it took me 5 years to set up that beautiful foundation in Australia. It shouldn't have to take 5 years to do that in every single territory if I want to be independent, which I did. So how can I invent some technology to do that? Because I knew that technology goes arm in arm with the music industry historically. You think about vinyl, tape, CDs, pirating, streaming, digital downloads for a period of time. They're all technology, right? And so technology it's synonymous with music, and it makes things like distribution a few clicks. It makes things like getting publishing representation and neighboring rights sorted a few clicks. Building a fan base is only you can do that now with things like TikTok and social medias. And So you got all of these amazing things that technology have helped independent artists achieve, but no one was tackling this maybe unsexy but crucially important issue of networking. And so, or professional networking, I should say. So that was really, really where the Vampr idea stemmed from. And it was those quieter months in England when the buzz around the project was dying down that I had the mental space to conceive of it. And then, of course, ironically, as Vampr started to grow and I started to attract some investment money and we started to get our first several thousand users, I got a phone call from Keith Urban and he said, "Can you go on an arena/stadium tour with me?" And so I said yes. and
oh
and
no, Keith,
yeah.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. And then I had to make a decision at the end of that. I remember, never forget, on the final night of the tour, crying as I was walking off stage, because I kind of knew in my heart of hearts that was probably the last show I'd ever play, and it was, because I was representing other people's money at that point, which is a huge responsibility. Anyone who's ever had to manage other people's money will tell you that. And it was like, do you follow your passion? Well, they're both passions, I should clarify, but do you follow your sort of artist passion, or do you follow your responsibilities and business passion? And it was kind of a no-brainer because I was managing other folks' capital. And so that was a very challenging moment, but what a great problem to have. Do I keep yes.
I mean, it's really funny because I often talk to the musicians on my show about this, and you being a CEO, this is really a big thing, because I think it's the difference of, it's like we say there's a difference between analog and there's digital, and then there's a difference in the way a gifting actually is imparted to an individual, that they get this gifting. They really don't know where that gifting is really coming from, really. But all of a sudden, bam, he's now a CEO. And it was a CEO born out of something that was kind of like what he, didn't really want to do at the time, And so what do you do, And I'm sorry if I'm repeating anything he said, and I really appreciate that. But the insights are there, I mean, it's like a person can use any type of form, but when you go through the actual work of something and you've laid it down and you labored hard for that work, and it's a passion also. It's not like you're flipping burgers down at the Dairy Queen or something like that. I mean, this is a true passion that you had. Now, where do you think you got that passion? And now, all of a sudden, there's a man that comes up with a program that can actually hook you up to your true value in the gifting that you've been given. Man, I'm sorry, I just had to say it different than you, brother. That's just the way it was. But, that's kind of the insight that I have, and I could sit here and say, well, and ask all these different kind of questions. Well, why did I fail? And why, I have a son that has a band that is doing phenomenal in like Southern Oregon and in Oregon, in the United States. And they've gone on several tours across the United States, but they wanted to stick to the small van kind of thing. And I've always told them, I says, you guys need to hook into the bigger scene, get into the bigger part of being a musician, other words, making money at it. You don't want to weld on boats all your life, do you? Do you want to, is that what you want to do? And so those folks that know me and are going to listen to the show know exactly what I'm talking about when I tell you that story. But that's story after story after story after story I've heard
I think
from bands.
I think some kids get seduced by the romanticism of the tour bus and or the tour van at that point.
Oh man.
And I never, and I'm not saying the way I did it was right at all, but I never really liked it. It didn't gel with. I preferred to fly, and but here's the thing, and I say it facetiously, but it's kind of true. It's a mindset thing, like everything in life. And
Right.
if you're of a mindset of I'm not getting in the van. I don't want to be around smelly, teenagers, even when I am one myself. You hold yourself to a slightly higher standard. You end up demanding better paychecks. This is the kind of thing, and I try and tell this gently, because you can't say this forcefully to young artists because they'll tell you to piss off. But there is a tactful way of doing it. But if you hold yourself to that higher standard, others will treat you the way you want to be treated. So, I don't just want to be paid enough to cover the fuel of the tour van. I want $300 to pay for me to fly in and out. I want another $250 on top of that to recognize my time and talent, please. And if you can't do that up front, then I want to cut up the bar. But again, I was probably lucky to have a sort of slightly business mindset going in, which rankled a lot of people. Like, you ask people in the music industry who know me, they'll either tell you one of two things: he's the most fiercely loyal, lovely guy I've ever met, or I hate him, he's aggressive.
No, that's true. Very true.
And that's what people say about me, and that's perfectly okay. And there's probably the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But that is a mindset that can only be a good thing. I mean, if you were a plumber, you would want people to cover the costs of your tools. And
you bet.
Right. Okay. So I think that music is absolutely no different. It's an industry, it's a business, and as an artist, as an early stage artist, whether you like it or not, you are a business. And I feel it's a big part of my duty to drive that message home without forcing it down people's throat. And that's what we're trying to do with our marketing at the moment, is find gentler ways to communicate that in a way that speaks to people in that stage of their life where perhaps they don't want to fully reconcile that they are running a business when that's exactly what they're doing.
No, really, that's true. The monetization of a band. I mean, if you can get 4 or 5 guys to even see that, is it's mind-boggling how hard it is to even present that. And so you must have a way to present it that I sure don't. That's for sure. I mean, it's like
the reason why I would say 99% of projects that fail is because there is a misalignment in the common goal. And that's another one of these little hacks. If in your first band meeting or your first artist project meeting that you have, you don't go around and say, what are you in this for? What are you in this for? What are you in this for? And then talk it through and come to some fine commonality. If you don't do that, guarantee at some point the thing will fall apart. And but it's one of those things that if you do it head on and right at the top, you can absolutely counteract that and set yourself up for tremendous success. Which is one of the other reasons why the Vampr algorithm looks less at things like genre and skill. It actually looks at things that you have in common with people, your favorite artists that you tell us that you listen to, age range, locations. We look at commonalities because we understand inherently that the reason artist projects are successful are not because of the things that make us different, but usually because of the things that we can agree on, because that's the key to a relationship. And going into a band is to be in a relationship. And so we try and, again, help gently push that along using technology and invisible stuff. But it's not all magic. As I often say to, sometimes we get people write into us the support line, and we'll get an email that says, I've been on your app for 3 days. I haven't met anyone famous. F you. And we'll say, okay.
Oh, man. Can't believe that.
We'll say, okay, well, what have you achieved? They go, well, I've only connected with 10 people. I go, 10 people? That sounds to me like we're working we're doing God's work now. Like that sounds like a great result to me. And so it's all about expectations too, and managing those. But yeah, that we could go down a rabbit hole there. But I do think a lot of music tech startups make the mistake of promising to change people's lives and make them famous, and we just don't do that.
I've got to say, I want to kind of get in here on this because it's like, okay, a fella like me, okay, I live in north central Kansas, and Jewell County is 36 square miles. That's what it is. It is what it is. It's 36 square miles. There's only 2,900 people in that whole county. That's like, it's like your chances of meeting another musician with the same ambition and the same mindset and goals inside that county, let alone a player that is able to even do that job, it's astronomical. As versus like when I lived in Kansas City, I went to a blues jam one time and I had a band, and then I got invited to another band. It just exploded. It just, and we all had the same goal. We all wanted to just play blues, man. We had that vibe. We wanted that feeling. We had the vocals. We had everything surrounding to make the chemistry happen, to actually make a fairly good living at times, and I mean a really good living. But I like what you brought up. It's almost like you need a contract, and what is a contract? A contract is an agreement between two people at a set goal, at a set rate, to promote a certain item that you are both after. And if you both sign on the dotted line, you're on the dotted line and you're on your way to something spectacular. And I think that's what it's like if I hear what I'm hearing, in my contractual mind, because I was a contract administrator for a lot of years. And that's one thing that I've learned is that you have to bring two parties together. Even if I'm writing the contract, you have to bring them together in order to accomplish any kind of goal. And why is music so hard? It shouldn't be hard. I think it comes with the word, well, we're playing. Okay, you play guitar, so you're just playing. That's nothing important that you're just playing. It's just a guitar.
So, it's funny. I mean, I have nothing wrong with the word play. In fact, one of our taglines is "play together" because it's cheeky, and we like it. But it does, when you really think about it, and I haven't probably until you've just said this, so thank you. But when you do think about it, it really does cheapen the whole thing from at a fundamental early stage, right? So, like you say, when people think of musicians as just playing, like, it's no wonder that people then expect music to be free. They expect tickets to be cheap.
Right.
Because they're just playing. But of course, no, we're fucking working.
That's exactly right.
We've invested in our skills, arguably more money than almost any other trade out there. I mean, we've been buying instruments since we were 10, and those instruments don't come cheap, and the lessons don't come cheap, and all of it starts to add up. And the servicing of equipment and the travel time and the unpaid rehearsal sessions and the hours of all of it. I mean, yeah, it's goddamn work.
Yeah, we got paid to schlep equipment, basically. I mean, that's what it seems like. You get, people want to pay you for just setting up that equipment. They don't want to pay you for the art that whether you want to call it art or not. Well, it is numbers. A guitar is numbers. Yeah, that's true. They're numbers, but their music, their emotions being poured out to you that person has studied. They studied and they studied and they studied until it drove them crazy. Now he's got $5,000 worth of equipment and he's getting paid $100 a night. Now, how fair is that? Huh?
Yeah,
I mean, it's not right at all.
Whatsoever. And so that's even more of a reason to be dogmatic about finding like-minded people to work with, because the sooner you can get beyond that $100 a night phase and get into the phase when you're starting to get paid a couple of $1,000s a night, and it doesn't take long. There's not much in between those two, right? The next phase up is harder, but I digress. if you can get from A to B, you can get from B to C, you can get from C to D. The thing that will keep you going through that time is the resolve of the group, the glue, that social contract that we talk about. But yeah, it really is so important it's like choosing a founder in a tech company. Like, it's the most important decision you'll make, and it's also the first decision you'll make. And so what are the chances that you get that right? Pretty low, pretty low. Statistically speaking, incredibly low. And that's why 99% of bands don't make it. 97% of artists remain forever undiscovered. Because a lot of the most important decisions you'll ever make are going to be made on day one when you don't have arguably the experience to make them. And so that's why companies like mine are very important, I think, to the health of the entire industry.
Oh man, I tell you, you've hit so many nails on the head. It's not even funny. I mean, it's like I can't even dispute you. And usually I can find something. There's nothing here. I'd like to ask you something. This is something that's written on one of your pages about you, and I really, really think that this is really a question that really is on my mind, because it seems like at times when you're the person in control of everything, you're the leader of the band, you're the one that's deciding the songs, you're the one that is spending all the time in the recording studio, you're the one that's making sure everybody's making, the bass player is going to show up on time, or the drummer is going to show up on time. That's you. And so sometimes I have to ask this question: why is being the smartest person in the room, what, I mean, really, how hard is that? I mean, it's like when you bring that up, whenever I talk about that, it's like, I mean, when you have the idea and you're putting that idea together, and now you're going to communicate it to somebody. You're in the know of something that they don't know. What's the hardest part about that communication? What is that?
I'd start by saying you don't want to be the smartest person in the room.
That's what it says. Yep.
Yeah. Right. If you're the smartest person in the room, then that means that the output is going to be limited by your knowledge and your expertise, which might be good enough especially if you have a track record. But typically speaking, a sensible gentleman or gentlewoman would put themselves in the company of folks who have achieved more or have had more life experience, or collectively within the group of people you assemble in a room, there's a wealth of experiences that far transcends your own. Man. Because the project, which is ultimately what we work in service for, even as the band leader, you're still in service of the project, and the project can only benefit from a wealth of experience, which is easier to accumulate in numbers and through people.
And numbers.
And so, if you're the smartest person in the room, and especially if you're acting like it, you're probably a knob.
And you're probably not going to go anywhere. I mean, no, you're absolutely right. Because I agree with you. When you have 5 people that make up the mind or the synergy that can come from 5 people, it's the reason why I play music. And why can't it be the reason why I'm in the business of music? The same thing. It's the same goal. And it's like you said, man, I mean, I know what I did to learn to play the guitar like I play it. I would get with guys that are a lot better than me, and I would listen into what they had to say, or I'd watch them play and learn how to play what they played and do what they did.
They'd do a little run that you hadn't have thought to do, and you'd copy that, and that would become a part of your repertoire, and that's how you learn. That's how you grow. Imitation is imitation learning by doing. They're 2 really effective ways of upskilling, but you don't get that by putting yourself in a room with a bunch of players that are worse than you.
Man, no doubt. And so how long did it take you? I mean, in time wise, speaking of absolute time wise did it take you to get from performance to Vampr? How, I mean, was there a short period of time? Was it like 6 months? Was it 8 months?
Yeah. So Vampr was conceived of and registered as like a company in May 2015. But I was still performing until December 2016. So I was still
Oh,
actively playing for another 18 months. Um, and then by the time December 2016 came and went, and that was that concert I was telling you about, and I sort of knew that that was probably the end of the career, at least my artist career. Um, that was really the start of my tenure full time as a CEO. I mean, at that point, we already had employees in 3 different countries. It was starting to get pretty busy, and it only ramped up from there. Now we have 30 employees in 7 countries. It's very much a 17-hour a day kind of job. But the transition, I was very lucky. I've spoken about this in the past, but I was very lucky that I got to do both in tandem for a while there. And it was almost like passing the baton in a relay race, if you
oh,
will.
wow.
And I'm very fortunate that I didn't have to take a wage as a CEO because I was making royalties as an artist. And so I was able to keep that money in the business. And I was just, in hindsight, the timing was very good. But it's the kind of timing that you can't plan. And believe me, there's been many periods in my life where I've timed things horribly. So I'm not just the constant beneficiary of good luck or anything like that.
Oh, no,
If it
right.
sounds like that, I'm just sharing the good stories.
Well, of course, I mean, because we all have that. I mean, every last one of us. I mean, I mean, I think it's great that we're hearing, that from you. I mean, that's phenomenal, man. Because everybody, I think it comes down to, like Dora in Finding Nemo. It's like Dora, and she's with those fish, and all those fish are, they're caught in this net, and they can't get out of the net, man, and they can't, and they're all swimming around, and they're all banging into each other. It's crowded, they're all screaming, and Dora says, "Swim down," she starts surrounding the net and saying, swim down, everybody swim down," and Nemo's in there. I mean, it's just a phenomenal story about how we do that. I mean, anybody can swim down. You could join the crowd. Why not? They all got free by it. That's the whole message, that whole picture, as far as I'm concerned, is they got free from that net at that moment when Dora started saying, swim down together. And brother, that's what I hear you saying about Vampr. Man, join in. Come on, there's other people here. Come on, we can all make money together. Why not? How come?
No, the independent side of the business, like when we talk to investors, for example, about our market size, we quite consciously don't, or didn't, I should say, talk about the size of the recorded music industry because for many years it was irrelevant to independence, and it wasn't a measure of health in the independent sector. Things like instrument sales and tuition is a much better indicator of health of the early stage scene, which is the scene we work with, until the last few years, where finally, for the first time, I think in history, the amount of money being generated, even in recorded music, from independent artists is beginning to chip away at the money that's being made by the major labels.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
A gigantic, like, one of those sort of magnitudinal shifts that I think we'll look back on and go, holy crap, that was an opportunity. And we're working with that right now and looking at that and taking it very seriously, because there is money to be made. It's actually being reported and recorded as public as much now. And that's a pie that all of these independent folks have the opportunity to take a bite from. And our job is just to make it as easy as possible to do that, which I think we do a good job of, although we could probably promote that even better. But the other thing that I will say is this. And this is one of the reasons why no one was doing something like a Vampr before us. Well, you could argue that MySpace did it actually, but Murdoch bought that and ruined it like he tends to do. But the reason no one else has been able to do what we've done since MySpace is because social networks and professional networks, like your example of the town that you live in, if you turn up and there's no one else there, why the hell would you stay? Right? And so the hardest part is making the party look full. And that's easy enough to do in a city like Los Angeles, right? Which is where I live. But how do you do that for every little town, not just in America, but the world, every single city and town in the world? And the answer is it's fucking hard.
Oh, man. Yeah.
It took a lot of time, a tremendous amount of money, patience, and thick skin, because most companies that have tried, and believe me, every other week competitors spring up and they all die around the 50,000 user mark because their investors go, we haven't made any return on investment. We're seeing a huge, what's called a churn rate, which means that's the rate at which someone downloads a product and then doesn't use it more than a couple of times and they churn. We're seeing a huge churn. We're not seeing any revenue. Yeah. We don't want to keep burning money. And we went through that phase too. The only difference is I'm running the company and I've been lean and just of course, I'm just very good with money, right? And I'm also just probably a decent-ish leader who had some experience running companies. But we went through that same mess. And the difference and the reason why I think Vampr is poised for continued success, I should say, is because we crossed that 50,000 sort of glass ceiling threshold many years ago. We're at 1.5 million people now. And we think that we can get to 300 million people in the next 5 years. And that's what we're working on.
Wow.
But you have to have, we always say no one is going to turn up to an empty party. So the only way that the Vampr message, which is one of positivity and inclusivity, the only way it can work is by spreading that message and spreading it quite fast and far and wide. It's expensive, it's tricky, but that's, as I say to everyone, that's my job to worry about, not yours. Your job is to enjoy the ride.
Well, I think too, it's like I told my friend Doug McLeod last night on the show. I told him, he says, I love them greenback dollars, man. I like it when they pour in when I'm playing something. Even if I'm not even recognized for it, man, I'm still the musician that I am. I'm still the guy that knows how to play and write and do other things. And I think I've ambushed myself more than anyone on the planet when it comes to music. I think I've ambushed myself. Like my wife used to do most of the promotion for me, and I used to get like 4 times more than all the other musicians while she was promoting me. When I went to self-promotion, because she went off to do a job at a 5-star, resort,
Yeah.
I mean, when she went to do her job, my ability just like diminished. It like disappeared. How did I go down from here? Like I said, I record some pretty good stuff every day. I mean, I'm sitting right where we are right now. Usually you're not on the screen, but I'm looking at my DAW program and I'm looking at what I played on the last section, and I'm looking at all that stuff and I'm piecing all that stuff together. And I've done a pretty masterful job at even mastering my own stuff, and I think that's the case for so many artists or musicians that are out there. And if they don't seek out how to make that pay, it's kind of like it's like I get asked, why are you doing this? I mean, why do you do it? I said, because I love it and I can't quit it. I can't stop. I can't stop no more than a heroin addict can stop his heroin. I can't. This is my heroin, is music. I love it. Not only that, I'm addicted to talking to other musicians. I love hanging out with other musicians. I think everybody on this planet, if you've played an instrument, you have something to offer me. You know,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Music is it's a cliche, but I believe it wholly. It's the only global language, and
It is.
it means that someone from, you know, Russia, China, Korea, any of those places where we might have conflicts with on paper, if they have the gift of being able to play music and they can sit in a room with you and you can share and exchange those ideas. The great thing about music is that all of those other things that I just talked about, the things on paper and all the wars and I suppose, you know, the fact that we're on different teams, whatever, all that goes out.
Man.
It just disappears, and you're communicating in a language that sort of transcends this idea of borders.
Oh, that's what the Olympics were born out of. I mean, it was to solve world crisis problems. Just think if you had different musicians from every section of the world and they were going to get together and solve the problem. Then we got to talk it out. Vampr, getting that contractual, let's get on the same page here. Let's talk the same language here is kind of so universal. It's so,
you know, one of the things that
beautiful.
happened. Thank you. I mean, when the war in Ukraine broke out at the start of the year, one of the things that really, well, made us a bit upset, but also gave us a lot to be grateful for, was seeing the number of people in Russia who were, because the Russian people did not choose to go to war, their stupid leader did. And the number of Russian people on our platform who were blocked from using the internet and social media sites like Vampr wrote to us in distress or dismay saying, well, it's Vampr stopped working, we can't message people now. All these contacts I'd made around the world, I can't contact because their Vampr account stopped working because I can't remember if it was Apple or Google or both, but some of them shut everything down on the app stores. Anyway, the point is,
they did, yes, Google did. I know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so we were, you know, we suffered some losses for that. That's fine. Like, you know, that's not the point. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that we really felt for those Russians that, again, they didn't choose, and I don't want to get political, but they didn't choose to go to war. And all they wanted to do was connect with other musicians and play and share their gift. And then on the flip side, we had Ukraine who reached out to us and said they couldn't afford their pro membership because Vampr has a free tier and a pro tier. And, you know, of course, we cut them a break and said, don't worry about it, look after your family. But it was just, for us, very, as I say, a combination of like, gave us hope, but also it was bittersweet seeing that these ordinary people get caught up in something that doesn't need to happen, and that all these people want to do is share their special gift with other people.
That's right. Yeah. Right.
And it reminded us of like what we're doing can seem trivial to some people, but it's really important to those who are the beneficiaries. And yeah.
Oh man, that's fantastic. I want to, I can't help but to rewind because that's the kind of person I am. It takes me a little bit sometimes for things to settle in. And the one thing is that you mentioned about Vampr going through the lean years, you know, and the time, you know, and you said that most companies drop out about 50,000. You said, is that right? So they drop out about 50,000, and Vampr just keeps going. That whole success came from just staying the course, just going, okay, we're not making that much money, but we're not going broke, and we're not, you know, we're no longer schlepping the equipment for $100.
We went broke. We actually.
Oh, you went broke.
Oh, yeah. So every startup should, they don't all, but they should have two budgets. You've got your kind of operating budget, and then what I call your lean/survival budget. And we ran out of money, like everyone who does what we do does. Everyone runs out of money at that 50,000-ish range, and we were a bit higher. We'd hit 100,000, but we'd running out of money quickly. I made the decision at a crucial juncture to switch to that survival burn where I could take what would have been a month worth of capital and stretch it to 6. So then that bought me 6 months to tear the business inside out, like look at it at every little angle, work out what we can do to change things and turn it around while also raising money. I ended up stretching. I took that 6 months, signed a very clever partnership with another company that, because we still had active users. So even though we were running in a lean mode, I had to fire all my staff, hardest thing I've ever done. Not all of them, but 90% or so. So we had agreements to get everyone to come back. I won't bore you with the detail, but we did some really drastic things to basically ensure survival. Signed a clever advertising agreement with another upstart music company that wanted to get exposure to our community. That kept us going for another 6 months. And then in that further 6 months, I pulled my old team members together from all over the world, brought them to LA, and we did a blueprint for what we thought the future of the company could be that was a profitable company as opposed to...
Holy smokes. Wow.
And we did this. It was exhausting. I had a bit of a breakdown afterwards, but we recovered from the breakdown. And then we launched a crowdfund, which in America, there's a thing called regulation crowdfunding, which was introduced with the Jobs Act by Obama in 2012. And it allows you to raise money publicly without going public. Mm-hmm. And not many companies pull it off. More and more companies do it successfully these days, but we were one of the first companies to raise the most permitted under US law in a 12-month window. And we did that very successfully, raised a couple of $1 million and turned all the lights back on and came back out, relaunched the company, relaunched the brand, rewrote the code from the ground up with a business model that was robust and sturdy from the outset. And here we are today, defying the odds. And yeah, it was a journey. It aged me about a decade.
Wow. Wow. But I mean, what wisdom that came together. You pulled all your people together from around the world and pulled this thing up out of the bootstraps. Man, by its bootstraps. Man, I got to tell you, that takes a lot of fortitude and belief in yourself and what you're doing, man. I mean, wow. It's amazing. I before we run out of time, I want people to hear your music. I want them to hear what you sound like. And because I usually, have a couple plays. We've had so much to say, and I really don't want to be pushed out of time because I like the time that I like to control that part of the world. And anyway, you have a song here. I'm gonna let's see. I like this one a lot. The name of it is Human Spring. Tell me about Human Spring.
Yeah, that's the title track of my first album.
Right.
The artwork on the back is my second album, but the Human Spring artwork sits above my piano. But that song was written at a time where there was another set of griefs in the world. It wasn't about oil or anything like it is maybe right now, but it was about... That was the Arab Springs, if you remember, and it was about bringing equality to the Middle East. And at that time, our band was thinking a lot about revolutions in general. We were sort of quite attracted to the power of people coming together for change, and we wanted to do it in a cool way that didn't seem naff or on the nose. So we created a fictional war called The Human Spring. And we wrote a whole album about it, and it was such a fun way to write an album because we had this short story of this very basic short story.
Fantastic. Oh man.
And every song spoke to the story, and if you listen to the album from front to back, it really tells the story of a soldier going through this fictional war, and he goes through everything that we all go through: love, loss, cheating, lust, temptation, reconciliation, triumph, reflection. And so it's a great album. It's a beautiful album. I'm very proud of it. And this is the title track, and it made me some money too.
Well, that's very important. Hey, but it has a lot of vibe and feeling into it that seems very real close to the heart. Even though all this fantastic music is going on, the storyline is just, I have to play it. Even if it is your first, it still is. I mean, here lately, I've been on this kick of having the artist, play what they played back in 1970 or what they played in 1984, whatever their date is, and for some reason it just always brings back this eclectic feeling of life again, and it's like, yeah, I'm back to life. Well, yeah, that's where I go. And then they have really a lot to talk about because the journey has gone from my first song to, wow, man, I've recorded 500 songs. I've, I mean, and
it's fun I haven't been asked about that album in years, but it's fun for me to revisit that because that song, we still recorded that on a desk, which is unusual. We did it on a beautiful SSL thing, which is, SSLs are a little crunchy, but it sort of worked for this song. And we recorded the drums in a makeshift studio somewhere. We recorded some of the guitars on a desk and the vocals on a desk. And then we did some of it in my garage, and then we mastered it at Abbey Road.
Oh my.
And then we did strings in South England. So I think altogether 7 studios were used to record that song, and I think you can probably hear it in the final mix.
Oh well. Yeah. I mean, when a guy's mixing something down like that, it is to the mixer's preference when you hand it to him. I mean, yeah, he could have the biggest name in the world, and you might have a little slight disagreement in the back of your mind with what he's doing, but after all, he has the name, he has the means. Man, that's about what making money is, give and take, and how far you are willing to go down to get to that point. Man, it's fantastic. I'm gonna go ahead.
I'll say one more thing about that.
Okay, go ahead.
What I learned about music from making that album, which I'm proud of, and I love listening to it whenever I hear it. But every song had like 100 stems, like 100 parts.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Had like orchestras and stuff. And what that inspired us to do is set a challenge for ourselves on the next album to create something as emotionally provocative, but with as few parts as possible. So it's like, can we achieve with 8 stems what it took us 113 the last time around? And that was the goal for the second album, which I think we got pretty close to.
Oh man, let's play this because I can see the clock is ticking and I don't want that clock to run out. That's so much to talk about. It's beautifully put, man. I mean, it's beautiful. There's nothing more I can say when you hear something that's been put into art that is profound to hear. And I think that's why we love music. That's what it's all about. It's that excitement, the passion of making sounds like that happen. And so when this was happening, even if you've been in 7 different studios and there's slightly some differences in there that you know about and somebody would have to really listen to really hear. I kind of picked them up every now and then, but it was like, it's still a beautiful experience either way you look at it.
Yeah.
It's like
I could hear my vocal performance changing from different rooms. And I haven't listened to that in like probably a couple of years, but the part that I always get stuck on with that in a good way is the drum part and the fills and the way it moves and the snare pattern's unusual. It doesn't sit on the 2 and 4.
no, that's true.
It's
It oscillates around it.
yeah, it's kind of it's a bit of an achievement, that one, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's such a short time to only get to talk to you, to only put an hour and 15 minutes into a program like this. But it's just phenomenal when I think of people like yourself being out there helping so many folks. And yeah, you're making money at it. You're supposed to, that's just it. You're supposed to. But then again, I'm hoping for those that also use your program that get the idea and they grow. And I'm hoping that they get the same return that you get out of it. It's kind of a real godly thing when you stop to think about it. It's larger than the small community of I live in a 36 by 36, square miles. But it is wonderful miles. But I'm still saying there's only 2,900 people here. And so that, so if you're not careful, you could lose the culture of the whole program of music if you're not careful. And people like myself, because I have the honor and privilege of being able to talk to folks like yourself. And I do count that as an honor and a privilege, by the way, brother. And the thing that I'm so happy about is that the musicians, when they get done, I really believe that I'm hoping that I'm inspiring them to climb higher, to go further, to expose them to a bigger world. And that's really what Burnt Possum Records is. That's what it's totally all about. It's about the musician, and someday I'm really hoping to monetize by it. I'm hoping that it comes back, but it's coming back in other ways too. So I'm not really, you know what I mean? I'm not hurting.
I'm glad it's coming back in other ways. And there's nothing wrong with supplanting one income with another. I think people do that all the time. Look at someone who works at, Albertsons during the day and then does a night shift somewhere else. It's fairly common, even if it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
Right. That's a whole separate thing. But what I was going to say is, like, for me, and maybe this is a good note to end on, I'll never forget, and maybe you have a similar memory, but I sure as hell will never forget being about 14 or 15 years old and sitting in a careers counselor's office with my parents. And in my case, my parents were able to clap back, but most people's parents wouldn't. And career counselor saying, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" You go,
"Oh yeah, for sure, for real, yeah,
yeah, right." Well, I am, in your mind, you're like, I already am grown up, and I want to be a creative, and I want to make music or make movies or whatever it is that you want to do, right? That's like statistically speaking, that's about 75% of kids, and unfortunately, today, most careers counselors' response, or parents, is to say, "Yeah, well, that's not going to happen, so go and get a real job."
Oh, man.
And my mission statement, and when I know that Vampr has succeeded, is when folks no longer say, "Go and get a real job," and they know there's a resource out there to get started, to start making money instantly, to start networking instantly, to tap into educational resources instantly. If we solve that problem, we've changed the world forever, and I'll die a happy man, I think.
Oh, man, that's fantastic, brother. I really appreciate you being on the show. Folks, you've been at burntpossumrecords.com. You're on a podcast and with the CEO of Vampr, and it's about the musicians and the musicians that I've been talking to and about for all along. This man has come along and created a program for you that truly should be used. And I want to end it with this song here, and I want to tell you, thank you for listening. I couldn't do it without you. Here it is. I'm Howlin Steve Howell, your host for burntpossumrecords.com. My message today is the same as it's after every podcast I have. First of all, I have a deep admiration for those who come on my show, and I really got to hand it to Josh Simons for what he has done in life and what he's still trying to put across to everyone. And I don't think he's trying. I believe he's building that message, and it's happening. But one thing you have to do to survive in life, remember to be kind to one another. Remember to fall in love with community again. Be a community. People with an open mind. Yeah, we don't all think alike. So what? Yeah, and it's easy to get in your car and become one of the most angriest people that ever walked the earth. You don't have to do that. Look at it's point A to point B. There's no reason with offering kindness in between point A to point B. And there's nothing wrong with asking for kindness. But it's if they say no, how you respond. And folks, I tell you, Howlin Steve Howell knows what it's like to be angry driving a car. What I've done, I'm ashamed of. And I tell you, don't do like me. Just do what I say. Hey, thanks for listening and hanging with the band. Hey, Josh Simon, thank you again, brother, man. You're fantastic. I love the fact that you came on my show. Wow. And we're going to say goodbye. You have another word? One word? Quick word?
Just thank you, Stephen, for having me. It was fun.
Oh, man, I love it, man. This is what I'm all about, brother. I love this stuff. Hey, everyone. Goodbye. And remember to be kind. And that Howlin Steve Howell loves you. We'll see you. Bye.
Nicely done.